The distant whistle of the approaching train pierced the warm summer air as Sophia Zimmerman stood alone on the weathered platform of Montezuma, Colorado. It was 1878, and the June heat pressed down upon her like an invisible weight, causing beads of sweat to form at her temples despite the parasol she held above her head. Her life in Boston was now behind her, every comfort, every familiarity traded for an uncertain future in this dusty frontier town. Sophia watched the iron beast approach, its black smoke billowing against the clear blue sky. The locomotive slowed with a screech of metal and hiss of steam, coming to rest before her like some great dragon catching its breath. Passengers began disembarking, men in suits and women in traveling dresses, all looking far more composed than she felt after her own journey west. "Last stop, Montezuma," called the conductor, a stern-faced man with a gray mustache and pocket watch in hand. "All passengers must disembark." Sophia approached him hesitantly. "Excuse me, sir. My trunk?" The conductor barely glanced at her. "Baggage car, miss. They'll be unloading momentarily." He tipped his hat perfunctorily and turned to help an elderly woman descend the steps. Sophia made her way toward the baggage car, her heart pounding. 22 years old and entirely alone in a strange town, she felt like a child again, lost and uncertain. The teaching position awaiting her was her only anchor, a single thread of purpose that had drawn her across the country after her parents' passing left her with no reason to stay in Boston. She spotted her trunk being unloaded, its familiar brass fixtures glinting in the sunlight. Before she could reach it, the train conductor returned, closing the gate to the baggage car with a decisive clang. "Sir, my trunk, station's closing in 30 minutes, miss," he said, checking his watch again. "You'll need to collect your belongings promptly." Sophia felt panic rising in her chest. Her trunk was larger than she'd anticipated, and she had no idea how she would transport it to the schoolhouse where she was expected. She stood frozen, staring at her predicament. "Need some help with that, madam?" The voice came from behind her, deep and warm like honey over rough stone. Sophia turned to find herself looking up into the face of a man who seemed to have stepped straight from one of the dime novels she'd secretly read as a girl. He stood tall in dusty riding clothes, a worn Stetson pushed back on his head revealing sun-bleached brown hair. His face was tanned and weathered, but his eyes, a startling clear blue, crinkled at the corners when he smiled. A leather gun belt hung at his hip, marking him unmistakably as one of the cowboys that populated this wild country. Yes, thank you," Sophia managed, trying to maintain her composure. Without another word, the cowboy stepped forward, lifting her heavy trunk with surprising ease. "This way," he said, nodding toward the dusty street beyond the station. "Where are you headed?" "The schoolhouse," Sophia replied, hurrying to keep up with his long strides. "I'm to be the new teacher." The cowboy's eyebrows rose slightly. "Miss Zimmerman?" Sophia stopped. "How did you know my name?" "Small town," he said with a smile that transformed his face, softening the hard edges carved by sun and wind. "Word travels fast when a new schoolteacher's coming. I'm Wade Owens, ranch foreman at the Double Bar, just outside town." "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Owens," Sophia said formally, though her heart had begun beating a little faster. "Just Wade, madam. Nobody calls me Mr. Owens except the bank when they're trying to get me to take out a loan." His casual manner both shocked and intrigued Sophia, so different from the formal interactions she was accustomed to in Boston society. She found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. "Very well, Wade. And you may call me Sophia, if you wish." They walked in silence for a moment, the only sounds the creak of his boots and the distant piano music drifting from the saloon. Montezuma seemed both exactly as Sophia had imagined a western town and utterly foreign wooden buildings lining a wide dirt street, horses hitched to posts, men in cowboy hats and spurs moving with a loose-limbed grace she'd never seen back east. "First time out west?" Wade asked, adjusting his grip on her trunk. "Is it that obvious?" Sophia replied, feeling self-conscious in her traveling suit, which suddenly seemed absurdly formal. "Just a bit," he said with another smile. Don't worry, you'll get your western legs soon enough. As they walked, Wade pointed out the essential landmarks: the general store, the sheriff's office, the doctor's house. Sophia tried to absorb it all, but found herself distracted by the man beside her. There was something compelling about him, a quiet confidence that seemed to anchor him to the earth. Here we are, Wade announced as they approached a small white building set slightly apart from the others. Montezuma's Temple of Learning. The schoolhouse was modest but neat, with a small bell tower and fresh white paint. Beside it stood a small cottage that Sophia assumed would be her living quarters. After the long journey, the sight of it nearly brought tears to her eyes. "It's lovely," she said softly. Wade carried her trunk up to the cottage door. "Key should be under the flower pot," he said, nodding toward a clay pot containing a slightly wilted plant. Sure enough, Sophia found the key and unlocked the door. The interior was simple but clean: a small sitting room with a rocking chair and bookshelf, a tiny kitchen, and what she presumed was a bedroom through another door. Wade placed her trunk in the center of the sitting room. "Well, Miss Sophia," he said, removing his hat. "Welcome to Montezuma." "Thank you for your assistance," she replied formally, suddenly aware they were alone together in her quarters, something that would have been scandalously improper in Boston. "Mayor Thornton's wife will likely be by tomorrow to check on you," Wade said, seemingly unaware of her discomfort. "School term doesn't start for another 2 weeks, so you've got time to settle in. I appreciate you letting me know." Wade replaced his hat and moved toward the door. "If you need anything, just ask anyone in town for the Double Bar Ranch. They'll point you my way." After he left, Sophia sat in the rocking chair, overcome by the strangeness of her situation. She was truly on her own now, in a place where everything from the vast open sky to the casual manner of its inhabitants was foreign to her. Yet she couldn't deny the small flutter of excitement beneath her fear. Something about this place, and perhaps about the blue-eyed cowboy who had helped her, called to a part of herself she hadn't known existed. The next morning, Sophia was awakened by a knock at her door. She hurriedly dressed, smoothing her hair and pinching her cheeks for color before answering. Mrs. Thornton proved to be a bustling, friendly woman in her 50s who had brought fresh bread and preserves to tide you over until you can get to the mercantile, she chattered as she helped Sophia unpack, sharing town gossip and advice with equal enthusiasm. "Now you met Wade Owens yesterday, I hear," Mrs. Thornton said with a knowing look that made Sophia flush. "He kindly assisted me with my trunk," Sophia replied carefully. "Good man, Wade. One of the best hands in the county. Could have his own spread by now if he wanted, but he's loyal to old Mr. Barnes at the Double Bar." Mrs. Thornton folded a tablecloth with practiced efficiency. "Never married, though plenty have tried to catch his eye. They say he was sweet on a girl years back, before the war, but she married someone else while he was away fighting. Hasn't looked twice at any woman since, far as anyone knows." Sophia didn't know how to respond to this personal history of a man she just met, so she merely nodded and changed the subject. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. Sophia cleaned the schoolhouse, organized books, and prepared lessons. She met many of the townspeople, who welcomed her with varying degrees of curiosity and warmth. Several families invited her to dinner, eager to introduce their children to the new teacher before school began. She didn't see Wade Owens again until the Sunday before school was to start. She had attended the small church service and was walking back to her cottage when she spotted him leaning against a hitching post outside the general store. "Miss Zimmerman," he called, tipping his hat. "Settling in all right?" "Yes, thank you," she replied, stopping beside him. "Everyone has been very welcoming." "Glad to hear it." He studied her face. "You look more rested than when you stepped off that train." "I feel more rested," she admitted. "Though I confess I'm nervous about tomorrow. It's my first teaching position." Wade straightened, towering over her petite frame. "Children out here aren't so different from children anywhere, I expect. Just a bit more familiar with hard work and wide spaces. Some have never had formal schooling before. Sophia said, voicing her biggest concern. Then they're lucky you're here now. His confidence in her, a woman he barely knew, was both baffling and heartening. Would you? Sophia hesitated, then gathered her courage. Would you care to walk with me? I was going to visit the creek I've heard so much about. Something flickered in Wade's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or hesitation. Then he smiled. I'd be happy to, Miss Sophia. They walked together out of town, following a narrow path that wound through scrubby pine trees. Wade matched his long stride to hers, pointing out native plants and telling her stories about the area. Sophia found herself laughing more than she had in months, perhaps years. The creek, when they reached it, was a ribbon of clear water cutting through rocky banks, shaded by cottonwood trees that rustled in the gentle breeze. It's beautiful, Sophia said, gazing at the play of sunlight on water. Different kind of beauty than you're used to, I expect, Wade replied, skipping a stone across the surface. Yes, but no less magnificent. Sophia gathered her skirts and sat on a fallen log. I never imagined I'd end up in a place like this. What brought you here? Wade asked, settling beside her at a respectful distance. My parents died last winter, Sophia said quietly. Influenza. I had been teaching as an assistant at a girls' academy, but without my parents, there was nothing keeping me there. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher needed in Colorado Territory, it seemed like a sign. I'm sorry about your folks, Wade said with genuine sympathy. Losing family is never easy. No, it isn't. Sophia looked at him curiously. Do you have family, Mr. Owens? Just a sister in Denver, he replied. Parents are long gone. Pa in a mining accident when I was 14, Ma from consumption a few years later. And yet you stayed. Wade looked out at the creek, his profile strong against the backdrop of mountains. This land gets in your blood, he said simply. Once you've lived under this sky, felt the rhythm of the seasons here, it's hard to imagine being anywhere else. Sophia thought she understood. Already, the vastness of this place was working its way into her soul, making the crowded streets of Boston seem like a distant dream. School began the next day with 28 students ranging from 6 to 16 years old. Sophia found herself challenged in ways she'd never anticipated, but also deeply rewarded by the children's eagerness to learn. Many had ridden miles on horseback to attend, their determination putting her own childhood academic complaints to shame. Weeks passed, and Sophia settled into a routine. She taught during the day, prepared lessons in the evenings, and occasionally joined the Thorntons or other families for dinner. She saw Wade Owens only sporadically at church, or when he came to town for supplies. Each time, they exchanged pleasantries, but their conversation at the creek was not repeated. Then came the October storm. It blew in without warning on a Friday afternoon, dark clouds gathering over the mountains and sweeping down with alarming speed. Sophia dismissed the children early, urging them to hurry home before the weather worsened. She was securing the schoolhouse windows when the rain began, not a gentle shower but a torrential downpour that beat against the roof like 1,000 tiny hammers. Lightning cracked the sky, followed almost immediately by thunder that shook the building. Sophia had just reached her cottage when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Through the curtain of rain, she saw Wade on horseback, water streaming from his hat and slicker. "Wade!" she called over the storm. "What are you doing out in this weather?" "Checking on you," he shouted back, dismounting. "Storm's bad. Creek's rising fast. Might flood the low areas. Come inside," she urged, opening her door wider. Wade hesitated only briefly before leading his horse to the small covered porch at the back of the cottage and tying it securely. Then he joined Sophia inside, removing his dripping hat and coat. "You're soaked through," Sophia said, fetching a towel. "Here." "Thanks." Wade toweled his hair roughly. "All the children get home safe?" "I believe so. I sent them off well before the worst hit." Sophia stoked the small stove, adding another log. "Would you like coffee? To warm you up? That'd be mighty appreciated." As Sophia busied herself with the coffee pot, she was acutely aware of his presence in her small home. It was highly improper, yet under the circumstances, it would have been cruel to send him back into the storm. "How bad is it likely to get?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady as lightning flashed again, illuminating the room in stark white light. "Hard to say. These mountain storms can be unpredictable." Wade stood by the window, watching the rain. "But your cottage is on high ground. You'll be fine here." The coffee finished brewing, and Sophia poured 2 cups. They sat in the small sitting room, the storm raging outside while an awkward silence grew between them. "I should apologize," Wade finally said, "for the impropriety of being here." "Your reputation is less important than your safety," Sophia interrupted firmly. "I'm not concerned with gossip, Mr. Owens." "Back to Mr. Owens, are we?" he said with a slight smile. Sophia flushed. "Wade, then?" Another crack of thunder shook the cottage. Sophia jumped, spilling coffee on her hand. "Careful," Wade said, taking the cup from her and setting it aside. Without thinking, he took her hand in his, examining the reddened skin. Not too bad. The touch of his callous fingers against her skin sent a jolt through Sophia that had nothing to do with the burn. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither moved. Wade released her hand first, clearing his throat. "Storm might last a while yet. Then we have time for you to tell me more about Montezuma," Sophia said, trying to recapture her composure. "How long have you lived here?" "Came back after the war," Wade replied. 1866. Place was barely more than a trading post then. As the storm continued outside, they talked. Wade told stories of the early days of the settlement, of cattle drives and harsh winters. Sophia shared memories of Boston, of concerts and libraries and crowded streets. The awkwardness between them gradually dissolved, replaced by a comfortable rapport that surprised them both. "You know," Wade said as the rain finally began to slacken, "you're nothing like I expected a Boston lady to be." "Is that a compliment or a criticism?" Sophia asked, raising an eyebrow. "Definitely a compliment." Wade's blue eyes held hers. "You've got grit, Sophia Zimmerman. Not everyone would leave everything they know to come teach in a place like this." "Perhaps I needed the change more than I realized," she admitted. "After my parents died, Boston held too many memories." "And now? Do you regret coming here?" Sophia considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "I don't. Despite the challenges, perhaps because of them, I feel more alive here than I ever did in Boston." Wade nodded, as if her answer confirmed something he'd suspected. "The West has a way of stripping a person down to what matters." The storm passed, leaving puddles in the road and a fresh, clean scent in the air. Wade rose reluctantly. "I should head back. Mr. Barnes will be wondering what happened to me." At the door, he turned back. "Would you? That is, I was wondering if you might like to join me for a picnic on Sunday? After church? Weather permitting, of course." Sophia felt her heart flutter. "I would like that very much." The picnic was the first of many outings. Through the fall and into the winter, Wade and Sophia found reasons to spend time together. He taught her to ride properly. Side saddle was impractical in Colorado. He insisted and took her to see breathtaking vistas that could only be reached on horseback. She introduced him to poetry and Shakespeare, reading aloud by lamplight on winter evenings while snow piled against her cottage windows. They were careful to maintain propriety. Wade never stayed after dark unless others were present, and they were never alone in enclosed spaces except for her cottage during lessons. Still, tongues wagged in Montezuma. The handsome ranch foreman and the pretty schoolteacher were the subject of much speculation. "People are talking," Sophia mentioned one February evening as Wade prepared to leave after a reading session. "People always talk," he replied, buttoning his coat. "Does it bother you?" Sophia considered the question. "Not for myself. But I wouldn't want to damage your reputation." Wade laughed outright at that. "My reputation?" Sophia, I'm a ranch hand who fought for the Union in a county with plenty of Southern sympathizers. My reputation has weathered far worse than being seen with the prettiest woman in Colorado Territory. Sophia blushed at the compliment. Nevertheless, we should be mindful. If you're asking me to stop calling on you, I'm afraid I can't oblige, Wade said, suddenly serious. These past months, getting to know you, it's been the happiest time I can remember. The confession hung in the air between them, weighty with implication. For me as well, Sophia admitted softly. Wade stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Sophia, he said, voice barely above a whisper. May I kiss you goodnight? Her heart pounding, Sophia nodded. Wade's lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss that nonetheless sent warmth spreading through her entire body. When they parted, both were breathing faster. Good night, Sophia, Wade said, his voice rough. Good night, Wade. After he left, Sophia pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the imprint of his kiss. She had been courted before, in Boston, by well-educated men with clean hands and polished manners. None had affected her the way this cowboy did, with his straightforward manner and quiet strength. Spring came early that year, bringing with it wildflowers and renewed life to the valley. Wade and Sophia's courtship continued, growing deeper with each passing week. They rode together every Sunday after church, sometimes joined by friends, often alone. Wade taught Sophia to fish in the creek, laughing at her initial squeamishness about handling worms and removing hooks from thrashing trout. You're becoming a proper Western woman, he teased one April afternoon as she successfully landed a good-sized fish without assistance. Is that a good thing? Sophia asked, grinning with pride at her catch. It's a wonderful thing, Wade replied, looking at her with such tenderness that Sophia felt her cheeks heat. That evening, as they sat by the creek watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink, Wade took her hand in his. Sophia, he said, his voice unusually solemn, I need to talk to you about something important. Sophia felt her heart quicken. Yes? Mr. Barnes is getting on in years. His son doesn't want the ranch, prefers city life in Denver. He's offered to sell the double bar to me. Wade, that's wonderful, Sophia exclaimed. It would mean taking on considerable debt, Wade cautioned. Working harder than I already do, at least for the first few years. If anyone can make it succeed, you can, Sophia said with complete confidence. Wade squeezed her hand. The thing is, Sophia, I don't want to do it alone. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a simple gold ring with a small pearl. It was my mother's, he explained, voice suddenly uncertain. I know it's not fancy, it's beautiful, Sophia whispered, tears springing to her eyes. Sophia Zimmerman, Wade said, sliding from the log to one knee before her. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Sophia's heart felt too full for her chest. Yes, she said, the word half laugh, half sob. Yes, Wade Owens, I will marry you. Wade slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. They were married in the Montezuma church 3 weeks later, on a perfect May morning with sunlight streaming through the windows. Mrs. Thornton had helped Sophia make a wedding dress from fine white muslin ordered specially from Denver. Wade wore a new black suit that made his blue eyes seem even more striking. The entire town turned out for the celebration. The schoolchildren sang a song they had secretly rehearsed, bringing tears to Sophia's eyes. There was dancing and feasting until well after dark, the community's way of blessing the union of two people who had become dear to them all. Wade had prepared a small cabin on what would soon be their ranch, just far enough from the main house to offer privacy but close enough to be practical. It was there he carried Sophia across the threshold, both of them laughing with the joy of finally being alone together as husband and wife. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Sophia's head on Wade's chest, she marveled at the path that had brought her here. If that train conductor hadn't closed the gate when he did, she murmured. "If you hadn't been there to help me with my trunk, I'd have found you anyway," Wade said confidently, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Some things are meant to be, Sophia. You and me, we're one of those things." The years that followed proved him right. The double bar thrived under Wade's management, and Sophia continued teaching until their first child was born, a boy they named James, after Wade's father. 2 years later came Elizabeth, named for Sophia's mother, and 3 years after that, another son they called Thomas. Sophia eventually returned to teaching, opening a small school on the ranch for their children and those of neighboring ranchers. She found ways to incorporate her Boston education with the practical knowledge needed for life in the West, creating a curriculum that served her students well. Wade and Sophia faced challenges, as all couples do: harsh winters that threatened their cattle, economic downturns that made finances tight, the everyday frictions that arise between two strong-willed people sharing a life. But through it all, their love remained a constant, deepening and maturing like a fine wine. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Wade surprised Sophia with a trip to Denver, their first real vacation since the children were born. They attended the opera, dined in fine restaurants, and stayed in a luxurious hotel. It was a taste of the cultured life Sophia had left behind, now shared with the man who had given her so much more in return. "Do you ever regret it?" Wade asked as they stood on the hotel balcony, looking out at the city lights. "Leaving Boston? All the opportunities you might have had?" Sophia turned to him, taking in the face she loved so well, older now, with silver at his temples and lines etched by weather and laughter, but still handsome, still unmistakably her Wade. "Not for a single moment," she said truthfully. "That day when the train conductor closed the gate and you picked up my trunk, that wasn't the end of something, Wade. It was the beginning of everything." Wade smiled and drew her close. "Best decision I ever made, offering to help a pretty stranger with her luggage. And the best decision I ever made was accepting," Sophia replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss the man who had taught her what it truly meant to come home.